The director of the Fine Art Museums, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon, and a special hello to our online viewers. Before we begin, I'm just going to place us here with our land acknowledgement. The Fine Art Museums of San Francisco respectfully acknowledge the Ramaytush Ohlone, the original inhabitants of what is now the San Francisco Peninsula, and we further acknowledge that the Greater Bay Area is the ancestral territory of the Miwok, Yakuts, and Patwin, as well as other Ohlone peoples. Indigenous communities have lived in and moved through this land over hundreds of generations, and indigenous peoples from many nations make their home in this region today. Please join us in recognizing and honoring their ancestors, descendants, elders, and all other members of their communities. Thank you. So today's program is part of the Museums of Tomorrow Roundtable, a biennial convening of international and local museum leaders that fosters dialogue on the challenges and opportunities that are driving changes in the museum field. With our proximity to Silicon Valley and tech innovation underway here in San Francisco, there is a particular focus throughout the week on the evolving role of technology in museums. Organized by myself, András Szántó, and our teams and our many partners in the Bay Area cultural and technological sectors, the idea of MTR is rooted in the recognition that peer-to-peer dialogue across geopolitical and industry lines is essential to museum work and to the cultural diplomacy function that museums often play in societies around the world. The inaugural iteration of MTR in 2023 brought together 13 incredible international museum leaders and a core of local museum directors. And before I speak about that in greater detail, it's impossible for me to speak without acknowledging our dear friend Koyo Kuo, whose sudden passing just a few days ago has left her many friends around the world feeling quite shattered. As a fierce proponent of African artists, diasporic artists, and the development of central infrastructure on the African continent, Koyo was a leading light and a true force in the international art world, which is very much reflected by her selection as the curator of the forthcoming biennial. She was a fabulous member of the 2023 MTR cohort, challenging us to think expansively and critically, and as was characteristic, her joie de vivre was a defining aspect of that week. So we're honored to dedicate this week's proceedings to her memory, and we're grateful for the time that she spent with us in the Bay Area 2 years ago. In that heady moment of spring 2023, when generative AI was in the midst of its kind of explosion into the public consciousness, our MTR group was able to think collaboratively and creatively about the agency of museums and the opportunities available to our field in the AI era. Ironically, even as we thought deeply about the evolving role of technology, the most important takeaway for many of us from that first convening were the human connections that were formed during that week. This year, as technological advances race on and AI applications proliferate, geopolitical events and macro shifts in our world order have really been the defining backdrop of our planning for this year's MTR. And if we ever needed a reminder that personal human connection remains paramount, the challenges of our current moment have done just that. We have an absolutely incredible group gathered for this year's MTR, and though the specific contexts in which we are operating all have their unique challenges and opportunities, the concerns that we share are remarkably similar. As stewards of various cultural institutions around the world, we are of course focused on the here and now, but we're also thinking about longevity and the future impact and the role of our institutions 2, 3, 5, 10, 25 years out. That is really what the first part of today's program will explore. In the face of unknown future challenges, how do we safeguard and best prepare our institutions? Before I turn over the mic to András Szántó, who will be chairing the session, I want to take a few moments to say some heartfelt thank yous to the many people who've made the Museums of Tomorrow Roundtable and program possible. First of all, I'm very grateful to the sponsors for their visionary support and for making it a reality. David Wadhwani and Adobe, Julia Zen and Zeni, the John Pritzker Family Fund, and Dave Spencer, our upcoming board chair, who's with us this afternoon. I also want to thank our many program partners and program hosts. The collaborative aspect of MTR is really part of what makes it so special. And this year, our collaborators include Donum, SF MoMA, the Asian Art Museum, 181 Fremont, Anthropic, Salesforce, Bloomberg, Filoli, NVIDIA, Google, Adobe, the Cantor Arts Center at Stanford, and Kamal Shah and Gaurav Garg. So huge thanks to all of them. Is that me? Someone here? No. I also want to thank Refik Anadol, groundbreaking artist working with AI, who's traveled up from LA to be with us for the second part of today's program. I also want to thank our in-house team, AV, public programs, communications, development, security, VX, and special events, and to the MTR team, Guada, Lindsay, Sarah, Madeline, and Claudia, who've been really just so key in making this all happen. So with that, I'm going to introduce András Szántó, our partner in crime on this, who advises museums, foundations, educational institutions, and corporations on cultural strategy and program development worldwide. András is a widely published author. His writings have appeared in the New York Times, Art Forum, ArtNet News, and the Art Newspaper, not to mention 2 very significant books that he has written about the museum industry, and a third that is forthcoming. András and I worked together at the Met some years ago in a similar convening we called the Global Museum Leaders Colloquium, and the concept of MTR really grew out of that collaboration. So András, it's a great pleasure to welcome you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It's lovely to be back. I remember being here around the time of the pandemic, and it's really great. And of course, we were here 2 years ago with a similar group. And thank you, Tom, and thank you to all of the team who are here and who have been mentioned. It really takes a village to make these programs happen. And I think it really is important to do these kinds of convenings. This is an international group. We have 14 visitors from 14 different countries, really all around the world. And in times like these, and you know what I'm talking about, it is very important to keep these kind of contacts alive. So I'm going to be up here for 2 back-to-back sessions, but there will be a 20-minute break in between, and I'll be back with Refik as well. But let us get into it. So how can museums adapt to accelerating change? We know that regardless of your size, and I should mention that in this year's MTR, we have entities ranging from annual budgets of $200,000 to $500 million, or euros, or however you measure it. Every institution needs to adapt to society, which is moving very rapidly. technology, which has been our main focus and remains our main focus, many of us are heading down to the peninsula in the coming days to really immerse ourselves in the world of technology, is maybe the most important driver of change these days. I like to say that art is humanity's most complex data, and the world of technology is now sufficiently sophisticated to meaningfully engage with our sector in ways that it hasn't been able to do before. But with the arrival of AI and massive algorithmic and computing capabilities, we now have real partners, perhaps disruptors, in the world of technology. And this is all very exciting and unnerving at the same time, but it's not the only vector of change. We have, of course, global economic shifts. In case you haven't noticed, we have political changes. We have demographic transformations. In 5 years, there will be more old people in our society than young, at least here in North America. Taste patterns are shifting. Philanthropy is shifting. Government funding most certainly is shifting. Museums as organizations are changing. And of course, looming over it all is the climate emergency. So there's really a lot of things that we have to deal with. And museums and their leaders need to make very, very complex decisions looking out 10, 15, 20 years into the future to make sure that they will be here. Museums are supposed to be custodians of these wonderful things, but they need to still be here to do that work. So we're going to hear first from two of our colleagues from two very different parts of the world to see how they are, as we like to say, future-proofing their institutions. And once we've seen that, Tom will join us again here. We'll talk about some stuff, and then there'll be time for questions. And I'm really hoping that some of our visiting directors will also join the conversation. So I'm going to first ask Ingrid Rønstad from Oslo to share some thoughts with us. I was very, very grateful to be with her a few months ago in Oslo, where she has taken over an enormous museum, national museum, which is itself an amalgam of 3 institutions in a brand new building. Norway has made massive investments into culture to position itself as not just a nation of fjords and the sea and the forest, but also as a cultural destination. And it falls upon her to bring this big institution forward. But fun fact, and you'll hear a little bit about this, before she did this, she was running the symphony. And, you know, speaking of art forms that have had to think about future-proofing, I think that those skills are being put to good use here. So, Ingrid, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, András and Tom, for this wonderful introduction. It's such a pleasure to be here, I have to say. I mean, this wonderful institution. It's the first time in San Francisco, so I'm really, really enjoying. So thank you so much. So a few words about this institution, the institution that I'm lucky to run, the National Museum of Norway. You can see this in front here is a little jewel, or there's a Nobel Peace Prize Institute or center, actually. It's a colleague of ours, but behind this, with a light hall on the top and the big construction around that, that's the National Museum of Norway. So it was founded a few years ago, but this new building, this new project, is actually a merger of 4 different museums. We're talking about the National Gallery, the Old Masters place in Norway, the Museum of Contemporary Arts, the Museum of Decorative Arts and Design, and the Museum of Architecture, with, of course, 4 strong cultures coming together in this wonderful building in 2022. So now we have this biggest collection, 400,000 different objects in this wonderful house, and we're still really exercising every day to try to make this huge organism, this huge and fantastic museum on the right track. 400 people, so it's a huge organization. So just a few words about who we are. And I always like to talk about the audience part of it, because that would also be a kind of headline for this little speech. We're about 5-6 million in Norway, and we have about 1 million in a year actually coming to the museum, which means that it's a very huge and bold kind of statement to make this happen, and it's actually, I think we can say it's a success. It has been embraced by a huge audience when it's first there and when it opened. About a little bit more than 50% came from Norway. I mean, a little bit more than 40% came from or are coming from other countries, but still, I mean, trying to keep up with the high numbers, around 1 million a year. There's where we want to be. And the age distribution, we're quite proud of, actually. This I figure out this is in Norwegian. År means years, which means that it's really important, and we're really very concerned about how to reach out, how to embrace the whole society, all the different age groups. And I think quite remarkable is it that we can say that 1 of 4 is under the age of 25. And that's really what we're aiming for, sort of to reach out very broadly. But we're in the National Museum for the whole country. That's so important for the politicians, and that's important for the whole society. And then I'm sort of aiming to what's sort of the headline of this talk. How are we adapting and thinking as a museum to meet the future, to meet sort of the mandate we have for the coming years? And as you see, Norway is a long country. We're sort of heading, I mean, we're in Oslo, in the capital, but I mean, the distance from south of Norway up to north of Norway is about the same distance as south of Norway to Rome. So it's a huge, long country where we have taxpayers in the whole country. And I want to come back to that, because the keywords for this talk is what we are talking a lot about, what we're working a lot around, is 2 keywords. It's about legitimacy and it's about trust. Because if we're going to still keep up our position with the audience, sort of high numbers, with the sort of huge enthusiasm there is around this building and around this museum as it is today, we need to focus on those 2 words. In Norway, it's a little bit different from the US. The public funding is really strong, and we have this idea that the state is actually a really good sort of, it's a very, very nice income to have. Let me put it this way. We can have the arm length distance to the state. We can do, we're a foundation, an independent foundation, and kind of 80, almost 90% of our budgets are coming from the state, which means that our sort of important mandate is to reach out to the whole country, that we need to sort of convince taxpayers, even if they don't want to visit the museum, they still should be proud of it. And trust is also a thing that we're talking a lot about. I mean, if we're going to have this legitimacy for the future and still sort of be the important place, I mean, we can see that the trust for media is going down, the trust when it comes to politicians is going down, but the museums, at least in the Scandinavian countries, are really, really keeping up a very, very strong position. And that we're so aware of, because the golden part, I mean, the really gold in our society is the trust. The trust among people, that we can trust institutions, that we can trust the facts that we're sort of presenting in the projects that we're giving to the society. And keeping that in mind, what is then, trust, legitimacy, what is that sort of some examples on how we're doing and how we're thinking? And I want to split that in three. I want to say something about the strategy. I want to say something about an exhibition that we're doing and coming up quite soon, really exciting. And something about a digital project from another world. So first, we want to embrace the whole society. And when we started 3 years ago to hire a lot of new people, because we had to hire 200 more people when we opened this new building, 200 more people like this. Then we were so concerned about, okay, what's important now? The important thing is actually that when people and when the audience are approaching this building, they can feel at home, which means that we have to represent the first person you meet in a way should be kind of person that you can relate to somehow. So this is the people that you meet when you enter the National Museum of Norway. They look quite different. They have very different backgrounds. They speak 21 languages, 22 if you count with the body language. And we're so eager to keep up on that. It has to be a place where everybody is embraced. And then, again, Norway is a long country, so we need to, as I said, think about, if you're a school class up north, you have no clue what the National Museum is, still it should be a digital project, a digital approach, some things that you can learn, see, experience from us. So that's also very, very important. And the next thing is also this one. And there are a lot of people in our society, of course, that has some special needs. Here we're seeing a blind, young, beautiful girl being embraced by one of our guides, having a guided tour of architecture. And that's also so extremely important for us, that these people are feeling embraced and at home. And this is not only for these people, but it's for their families, it's for, everybody around these with some special needs that we're also embracing. It's not about, they just love the National Museum because, we're really open for different approaches for people that need something extra to really appreciate what we're doing. And the other picture to the right, it's a group of people with dementia. And of course, if you know that if you have a parent with dementia and you know that this parent has a fantastic time at our museum, our idea is that you will also have a special feeling for our museum. Again, it's all about embracing the different audience groups, the different age groups, and the different sort of people in our society. So, to the exhibition, because this is so super exciting. Opening next week. We have never done this before, we've been kept on saying the last 3 years. We're all the time doing things that we've never done before. This is a pavilion just outside the museum. A new exciting project from a few of our beautiful, excellent curators, using food as the essential thing. Because, even if you don't relate to art, most people relate to food somehow. And this is the new Nordic cuisine. That was a movement that started in the Nordic countries about 20 years ago, actually in Copenhagen. And it has grown into a kind of international phenomenon. And in this exhibition, which is outdoor, indoor, we hope it to be the place to be during the summer. So if you're in Norway this year, please come. It will be open, very transparent, very sort of visible, and a fantastic sort of experience, we think, for everyone. And it's not only about food. You can have a coffee there over a fireplace. You can really learn about this manifest that was written sort of 20 years ago. It was all about sustainable sort of food, that you should grow your own carrots. You should really sort of use the food, local food, and to really sort of build on that for your own cuisine. So that was the basic idea. But it was not only about food. That's what few people know about. I mean, it's also about design, arts, architecture. So we're putting this good together, make it sort of huge happening, and really sort of opening the museum up for a bigger audience. And then to my third example, from the music world, I just wanted to share this because it was a very special project when I ran the Oslo Philharmonic for 10 years. Oslo Philharmonic Orchestra, wonderful, the biggest live band of Norway. And then it was the pandemic. And we had to change everything. I mean, we had the sense of urgency. Even in Norway, we have a lot of trust. We have quite a lot of money, you know, from the state and everything. But then pandemic happened. And then we entered this with the thinking of, okay, let's be a media house. Let's change the whole symphony to a media house. And how do we do that? How can we use this kind of sense of urgency situation in the best possible way? And you know, a lot of people have made podcasts. That's quite popular these days. But the way we did this, like with the right cast, with the right people, putting together sort of like normal people, but also kind of the politicians, the taxi driver, the student, the sort of high and low in the society, together with this man. He's a kind of popular rock star in Norway, really curious about classical music, but with not so much knowledge. That was I think it was top 10 most popular podcasts in Norway during that time. And that's how at least what I've learned, how to use sort of new technology, sort of kind of normal sort of tools, but really do it in a little bit of an untraditional frame to reach out to more people, to embrace more people, and to really, be out there with what we believe in. So just the last thing, this is a kind of tool for us, always trying to have the knowledge. We use a lot of time on surveys, interviews, to really know our audiences, and also those we don't reach, we don't reach out to in our museums. And then try to understand the barriers, and at the end, even if you're not able to visit our museum, can you still be proud of it, and how do we do that? So with that, I think that's all. Thank you so much.
Ingrid, did you know that the 10th most popular podcast in the US is about classical music?
Really?
No, just kidding. Philip Hinacho, this is, we're going from and sorry I said 3 institutions, it's 4 institutions. And all the other directors know exactly the headache that she has, because can you imagine taking 4 museums and putting them into one? But these are existing institutions. Philip has an entirely different challenge, which is to create an institution from scratch, which you're doing in Nigeria. This will be, when it's finished, it's a multi-stage, very, very ambitious undertaking. But when it is finished, it will be the largest museum, certainly in the southern part of Africa. And it's an extraordinary story, and it's happening in a country where there's no government money, or if there is, you might not want to take it, and very little philanthropic money. So tell us a little bit about how you're going to make this work and make it sustainable.
Thank you for that introduction, András. I should start by saying that our ambition is not to be the largest museum in sub-Saharan Africa. It may be that we end up that way, but and I'll explain a little bit why. It's funny that Tom and you picked Norway and Nigeria as the two countries to speak, because we are so different in many ways. I mean, Norway is a model of how a democracy should work, and how good governance works, and how a government can support the ambitions of the people. And Nigerian government isn't yet at that stage. I'll say it like that. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the museum itself, and I'll start by putting this up. And how I got involved with the museum. So I am not a museum person. I've not run any kind of not-for-profit in my life. So this is my first stint. I got involved because I was asked to help raise money for really an idea as opposed to a museum. So as some of you know in the audience, there's a significant movement in the West to restitute certain objects, including the Benin bronzes, or at least some of them. And one of the key things that is always raised in that debate and discussion is about, well, if we give Benin bronzes back, where will they go? Look at the state of the current museum infrastructure, etc. So this moment coincided with a moment where a friend of mine was in political office. So he was the governor of Edo State. Edo State is in Nigeria, and it is where the capital of the Benin Kingdom was and still is. And so it's a city with a great history of patronage of arts. And the governor was very keen that that somehow or the other he would be able to lead an effort to, as he would say, make Benin, enable Benin to reclaim its title as the Florence of West Africa. And so he turned to me and said, Philip, I know that you are passionate about particularly old African art, and I know that you know a bit about raising money. So my working career has been around raising finance, focused predominantly on Africa. So I'd like your help in realizing something in Benin. So this is the background of it. I'll explain where we are. So I'll do it backwards. I'll explain where we are, and then I'll work back to how we got there. Our vision. Our vision is centered around a campus. We are an independent foundation. We are established to preserve and promote West Africa's rich history and heritage while creating educational, economic, and cultural opportunities for the region. And at the heart of this vision is a campus. So it's a 15-acre multifunctional space which is opening in phases at the in the historic city of Benin. And that's kind of what we're about. You'll see in terms of visuals, you will see 4 main buildings: the Institute, the Art Guest House, the Rainforest Gallery, and the Artisans Hall. And I'll talk a little bit about all of that a bit later. And what I should say is that we have focused on the first building. Hang on a second. What have I done now? Just start this again. We have focused on the first building, which is. Sorry, I'm messing up this navigation thing. Give me 1 second. There we are. which is what we call the engine room of the campus. This building is a collections and storage building. It's a single-story building. It's a very beautiful building. It's a rammed earth building. And it's about 4,000 square meters of storage collection space. Embedded in the building is also a lecture research center, materials and conservation lab, and then some exhibition space at the front of it. And this building will be opening. We'll be moving into the building next week after next, and we will have our first exhibition in November. And I will show you what it actually looks like. So that top view shows the building from above. This is probably about 3 or 4 months old, so you can see all the ugly-looking HVAC on the top and a skylight. We have been very fortunate in the sense that we've benefited from a lot of the learnings from museums that exist today. This building, we had a great deal of input from Yale University, their Center for Cultural Preservation, just in terms of design and things to avoid. So the roof of the building will be covered with solar panels. We have additional small solar farm, which is, you can't see it in this picture, but is around the corner. Which means that the entire building will be powered with solar and battery, completely off-grid if we wish it to be. And in Nigeria, you have to plan to be completely off-grid whether you like it or not. And also minimizing running costs. One of the great things about rammed earth is it's very thick. And is good in terms of insulation. And then the roof itself is a living roof. You can't see it there, but there's already we've put soil and planting grass, etc., on top of the roof. So we've got a thick roof as well, which means it's a great building for conservation. That's an event that we had a few months ago within the building itself. And our programs are fairly broad, so we do everything from archaeology to heritage management to modern arts programming. You can see 3 images there. One is sort of a community-based program that we were involved with. The middle is archaeological work. So one of the great things about Benin is that it's at the center of it's a medieval city and very little archaeological work has been done. Our campus itself is situated on what was part of the royal enclosure. So the first 3 years of work have been predominantly archaeological work. And that's a picture from that. And then the last image to the right is from the Venice Arts Biennale, who some of you might have gone to. We organized and executed the Nigeria Pavilion at the Arts Biennale, and our curator curated the show with 8 artists. We did that because we wanted to show that we're not just about Benin bronzes, we're about contemporary art as well. So if we come to a little bit on future-proofing, and when I think of future-proofing, I think first and foremost about how to survive. So you have if future-proofing, to many, you think about digital age, you think about anticipating the future. We're thinking still about how to survive and how to anticipate and embrace, hopefully, a long future. And in that regard, there are a number of things which are key challenges. One of the key challenges that we face is relevance. By that I mean, we're in a part of the world where the hospitals don't have enough beds, schools don't have enough desks. So how do you justify spending a lot of money on art? Second issue that we face is around audience and community. One of the things I always notice when I go to museums in the West is the average age of the museum goer tends to be, apart from the school kids, tends to be a little older. The median age in Nigeria is 18. The average lifespan in Nigeria is 54. So we have an incredibly young audience, and we will continue to have an incredibly young audience. And we need to address their concerns, their issues. We need to be relevant to them. The other thing I should say about Nigerians and Africans, more than many people realize, are quite tech savvy. So Nigeria is in the top 10 countries in the world when it comes to cryptocurrency usage. More than 50% of the population has smartphones, and we have 200 million people. So we've got 100 million people on smartphones that are generally, which with the average age of 18. That's our space. The other challenge that we face is location. So as I mentioned before, Benin is this great, rich, historical city, but it is not Lagos. So our population in Benin is small, so it's about the population of Norway, about 4 or 5 million people, by Nigerian standards, quite small, compared to Lagos, for example, is about 25 million people. So the reason I brought that up is that our audiences are predominantly domestic audiences, and Lagos and Abuja and Port Harcourt, which are the larger cities, are core target markets for us. So we need to persuade people to come to Benin. And there's a number of things that we're doing to try to do that. And then finally, sustainability. That's the last thing that I want to talk about, and probably the most important. Like I said, it's about survival, financial survival, and we've sort of thought very hard about that from the beginning. So I'll go through quickly each one of these. Relevance and priorities. What's important from our perspective is to make sure that we're relevant to young people. That means focusing not just on visual art, but thinking about digital, thinking about fashion, thinking about film, photography, etc., and establishing a campus which is really targeting the creative sector, cultural practitioners. So our audience and our relevance is driven by the mission of supporting contemporary creatives. If you're a young photographer or aspiring photographer, we want you to come to us. We want to inspire you, and we want to connect you to global opportunities. We've also had to deal with the complexities of restitution. I could spend a week talking about the complexities around returning objects into a situation where there are multiple claimants. What we have decided to do as a deliberate strategy is to build infrastructure that could assist with restitution, but not to focus on restitution as a mission, and to work with those who are focusing on the restitution mission. The location, as I mentioned before, the challenge is that we are not Lagos, but in many ways, Benin City, with its rich history, some of you may know that the second largest man-made structure in the world is in Benin, and that is the Benin earthworks. So it's hundreds of kilometers of earthworks, walls and moats, which are still there. Benin, at its height in the medieval period, had 40 artistic guilds that were supported by the king of Benin, some of which still survive, still bronze casters still live in certain locations. So we're building on that. And then finally, and in many ways, the biggest challenge is sustainability, financial sustainability. So what we have done is we're focused on a campus. One of the things that I learned very early on is museums lose lots of money, but they create a lot of value for their neighborhoods. And several museums said to me, if we were you, we would own as much of the neighborhood as possible so that you can capture some of that value and use that to sustain yourself. So our core buildings are exhibition space, collection space, and traditional museum space. But we also have a boutique hotel that we would like to build on our campus, and performance space, music space, etc. And I have run out of time, so I'll bow out now. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to invite all of you to come up here, and then we'll kick a few ideas around. So I would say, all right. Well, I mean, you all have mentioned wonderful things. I think, you know, the resolute focus on audience age is something I want to come back to because it plays out so differently in our societies. Communication, a certain style of outreach, having a staff that reflects your audience, your society, the economics of you know, how can you ensure that you have revenue streams. But I think on top of it all is the word that you use, Philip, which is relevance, because you know the ultimate fact of future-proofing is that you will be relevant. So I'd just like to ask each of you, since I also know you're fundraisers and you have to do this, but what is your most succinct way of explaining your relevance to perhaps skeptical funders, be they government funders, private funders? What is the secret sentence that unlocks people's belief in the relevance of the museum? Do you want to go?
Should I start? No, but that's what it's all about at the core. I mean, how to
What's
really,
at the core?
I mean, to be relevant for the big audience. I mean, that's what it's all about. So I think for us is of course making exhibitions that's really ticking off the different audience groups that we're sort of trying to reach out to. But also to really accompany that with different presentations, programs, activities, all of that. So in total, we're reaching out because relevance is not only one thing. You need to be sort of relevant in a much more plural way than we have been before. I think that's sort of one of the main things we have to learn. I mean, that we have to be open, we have to be curious, and again, that's the reason why we're using so much time to try to understand the audience, what could be relevant for those different groups. So,
Tom, what about for you here in San Francisco? What do you find resonates?
I think that we did a new strategic plan about six years ago, and for us, we really focused in on starting with the local audience. We're city museums, and so first and foremost, we want to serve city audiences. And we've taken a number of initiatives that have really kind of sought to work with our local audiences, things like a free Saturday program or open invitation art exhibitions that really give a platform to local artists. And we've lent in as we redefined our mission statement to really focus on informing people about the past, engaging people with the present, and stimulating their creativity. And I think that's very much the core of a lot of what's driving our actions at the moment.
And Philip, for you, I mean, obviously your institution is not there yet, but I suspect you're constantly making the case for why it's necessary for Nigeria and you know others in there to support this. What is it that they resonate with?
Yeah, I think the thing that resonates the most is our focus and our mission around creating opportunities for young creatives. What I always say, West Africans are some of the most creative people in the world, and they've successful in the music world, successful in the film world, and the art world, despite the fact that there's absolutely no support from government. There's very few institutions indeed that exist. So our focus is very much around residencies. Every curator, international curator that visits us, we want them to talk to and train and interact with young potential curators. So it's about creating a future and supporting the creatives and cultural practitioners in West Africa.
So between the three of you, you talked about many things, but I'm curious, as you really look out into the future, and I know one of you has yet to build a museum, but what do you think will be the most challenging? Is it going to be to find the money to sustain it? Is it going to be to climate-proof your institutions? Is it going to be, keeping up with the culture I mean, what do you think will be the most challenging? What is the most challenging for you?
I think that the financial part will be really important to, I mean, in Norway, I mean, it's going to be so important for us to see other ways of finding money, because, I mean, the world are changing. We're using so much more money now on the military and healthcare system and all of that. And, I mean, so much of our sort of independence position that I was talking about comes from that we have a very stable and very solid funding, and we need to sort of rethink all of that for the coming years. But I think, I mean, coming back to the relevance, I think also that museum, I mean, loneliness, I don't know how it is here, but it's coming up more and more as a very difficult thing to deal with in the society. People are living alone, feeling much more lonely, and all the things that are coming around that. And also, again, to embrace that part. I mean, that's the part. I mean, we're talking about also the museum as a part of the healthcare system. I mean, maybe it sounds kind of weird, but, you know, art is in the center. But, you know, to really sort of legitimize our sort of buildings and places and institutions that way, I think that could help.
I'm not sure if it's Norway or Sweden where you can now get a doctor's prescription to go to the museum. Is that in Norway? No, it's serious. I'm not. This is not a joke. And I know that I'm prone to that. But in fact, there are now examples of where you could be prescribed a doctor to visit the museum.
Not yet in Norway, but I know in Sweden they've been talking about it.
In Sweden they're talking about it. Because indeed, as museums have pivoted to making this larger claim about their relevance as sort of community facilities, indeed health and wellness is a big area. Tom, on anything on this?
So I think what keeps me up at night are two major issues. One is financial. The American museum system has been incredibly successful for over a century now because of the kind of the public-private formula that there's a tax incentive to private individuals to give philanthropically, whether it's to religious institutions or to education institutions or to cultural institutions. And that's worked really well, but it seems like it could be under threat. So that's a big challenge to us in this current moment. But assuming we get through the next 4 years and the world doesn't end, I think the thing that is kind of really interesting to me, more sort of from a museological point of view, is how art is changing. On one hand, as you said at the beginning, we have an aging population who has grown up with a certain kind of art and loves certain kind of exhibitions and so on. And there are, in many respects, financially, they're our bread and butter at the moment. But at the same time, there's a younger generation who I feel we're really struggling to connect with. And it's partly because of the rise of digital media, digital immersive experiences and so on. And they, of course, they are both current and future audiences. And a lot of, we're going to be hearing from Refik in just a minute about his work in a very kind of cutting edge sphere. So how do we're very forward thinking, but how do institutions that are kind of grounded in a certain kind of structure reposition themselves to embrace new forms of art, new and often very expensive new forms of art? How do we lean into that?
Mm-hmm. But new forms of culture to embrace include many of the things you were showing. I mean, you were talking about music, obviously, as you would. We talked about food, and I'm so sorry I didn't come now for your cuisine moment. Education. I mean, Philip, you've been talking to a lot of people, clearly, and you do have a business background. I mean, do we need to rethink this business model to sort of build revenue streams around things like music, performance, cuisine, hospitality to sort of float the boat that way?
Well, I think the answer is if you're in Nigeria or if you're in Africa, absolutely. So the issue is, even if you get government support, it's extremely unreliable. It comes with a lot of strings attached, which you probably don't want to have. So we set up from the beginning, an independent foundation. We don't have massive amounts of money that we need to raise. We probably need about $50 million in total to do all 4 buildings. We've raised about half of that already, and we've built the most expensive building. So I don't worry too much about raising money to build the buildings. I mean, I'm not saying we're done, but that's not my biggest worry. The biggest worry for me is the ongoing running cost. Yes, a little bit of earned income from entrance fees potentially, but really we have to think out of the box in terms of, like I said, things like hospitality, partnering with the private sector from the beginning, even in the design of your campus, thinking about performance space in a very broad way, thinking about hosting design conferences, archaeological conferences, events, etc. So that's at the heart of our planning. I also think we've been very fortunate to build good partnerships. So we've got a good partnership with Mellon Foundation, Ford Foundation. We're discussing now with Getty. On the American side, and funding for programs is I think not straightforward but easier. The hardest thing by far is your core operating costs, as all of you know, and that's the bit that we hope to cover through earned income.
So,
are you anticipating a large tourist audience?
Domestic. Not international. I mean, yeah, there are people who want to come to Nigeria, but that's a small group, and we recognize that. It'll be a long time, I think, before Nigeria becomes a big international tourist destination. But West African tourism, and conferences, educational type stuff.
I'm curious. I mean, when you look out into the rest of the economy, are you seeing other sectors that are navigating changes that may be interesting things to be looking at? Because, the world is changing all around us.
What I found a little bit tricky coming to the institution where I am, where we have such a strong sort of public funding, it looks like it's even more difficult to really engage with the private funders and philanthropists and so on. So I think that could be a really difficult next step for Norway, that we need to build much stronger bridges and better bridges between the private and public sector. The public sector has been, as Philip said, amazing, and so well thought through, and it's such a solid platform to stand on. But for the coming years, when the economical situation will be different, and we need much more of the private engagement. That will be actually a little bit the opposite down from what you were saying, Tom. That would be the main challenge for Norway, that we need to sort of really embrace the private sort of sector in a very different way.
I just want to have a quick show of hands for people who have questions. Will there be some? There's a few. Okay, I want to make sure we have time for this. I'm going to ask one more question because I do want to open things up, and we have a whole bunch of other museum directors who can also perhaps chime in. Also as a bridge to our next segment, which will be with Refik. I mean, our group just spent the morning, our minds blown. We were at Anthropic, which is, of course, one of the leading AI companies. And I'm curious, this is a fresh experience for the three of you. What is your takeaway from what you're just seeing there? I mean, we got a real taste of just how fast things are moving. They described this moment as a paradigmatic change, even compared to the web. I feel like we've just adapted to that. What do you think you're going to need to do in your institutions? What is the most urgent thing you're going to need to do to keep up with this and to perhaps benefit from it? Tom?
I'm I'm really torn at the moment, putting on my scholar's hat. I take pride in knowing a lot about my field of study, tapestries. I know the 200 books, the other 200 articles in a range of languages that I go to construct narratives about a field I know well about. What I'm seeing this morning at Anthropic is almost like that is so over. Within a year, all those books all those articles will be available online. You could just ask a couple of questions. That information, whatever language it was originally published in, will be there and available. So kind of, what is my role as a scholar? But of course, my role as a scholar will continue to be asking questions, and once I get over the sort of the ego thing, in fact, it's kind of like super empowering that this will become a tool, just as the internet has become a tool and calculators became a tool, and we will become supermen, superwomen in some respects with this new power that will be at our fingertips in no time at all. So I'm totally disconcerted on one hand, and on the other hand, I'm very excited because of the potential for us to just share so much more, to understand more and to share more about our collections with our audiences.
And meanwhile, we can probably read your musings on all this at your new Instagram account, Tapestry Tom. How about you guys? What was your takeaway? Philip or Ingrid? Yeah, Philip.
Well, I thought this morning session was particularly interesting because in many ways, there's two aspects to, let's say, AI and technology that at least occur to me. One is around the true art world and the performance of art, for want of a better word, or the display of art, and the manufacturing or the making of art, where it's expensive, it's hard to display. The LED screens that you need, etc., is intimidating for an institution that is still focused on buildings. The other piece, though, which was about this morning, is around the storage and retrieval of information, the architecture in which you store information. And for a young institution that doesn't have legacy systems, to be able to have a good idea about where this is headed and to build that into what you're doing now is a great privilege and advantage.
I think, there is so much to reflect on. But running a big institution and again talking about the financial sort of challenges that will come in the coming years. I think also, just the basic. How can we use this? One thing is that we love the arts. We really want the physical objects there. We want the meeting places. We want sort of a lot of what we're doing to still be the same, but how to use AI in the most efficient ways for our people within the organization, how we work, how efficient we can be, how we can tell stories, how we can find the facts, how we can really approach this in the most sort of efficient way. That's sort of my thought.
So those are some thoughts about future-proofing. A couple of questions. We can barely see you, keep in mind. So there's a microphone descending the staircase. There we go. There's a hand right here.
I'm an art historian, and I have a question, especially for Ingrid, although it applies to Philip's institution also. I speak as someone who has visited your museums several times. I am especially interested in the stave church doorways because it's part of a research topic of interest of mine. And as an American, I wasn't allowed into Norway during the pandemic, and I feel as though I turned my back and you put 4 museums in a spaceship and landed on the moon. I can't wait to get back to Oslo. We went through a similar process here at the De Young of saying goodbye to a dear old building and embracing a new one. And my specific question to you is, how are you positioning the superb historical art of Norway in relation to this exciting new vision you have, AI technology, and so on? I'm also curious about literally how you've reinstalled them, but that may be more than we can get into right now. But just sort of conceptually, how are you integrating this with your vision for the future?
Oh, that's a big question, and we're not doing it alone. Luckily, there are more museums in Norway also that are doing a lot of the same. I mean, we're working very closely together with. But of course, I mean, with the new museum, we have thought very well through how to use sort of the long lines of storytelling about the history with music, with lightning. I mean, it's a kind of church rooms, the first rooms that we're entering when we go to that part of the collection. So, I mean, with the technology today, you can be so much different things within one building. So I think you have to come back and see it.
You won't be disappointed. It's an extraordinarily beautiful and far less monumental once you're inside when you look at it from the outside. It's rather austere from the outside. I think we had a question on this side. Gentlemen?
Yes, thank you. You've all addressed the essential question of outreach, but all of our societies have distinct components that are sometimes even at odds. And I know this is a difficult question, but I'd be very grateful if you could say anything about how you deal with social conflict and whether you really do try to reach everyone or whether you accept some limits on whom you can reach and serve.
Okay, as you can see, they're so eager to answer that question.
That's a difficult question to answer. I think that that we're not politicians. Our job is to display art. Our art reflects different points of view across history. Our contemporary artists reflect different points of view about today. And what we need to do is to create an environment where people can have a thoughtful engagement and learn from the past, be provoked to engage with the ideas of today. But at the same time, it has to be a safe place. We want our audiences, all our audiences, to feel safe here. So sometimes we have to walk a fine line between what we put on when. So I think that given some of the conflicts going on in the world at the moment, of course that's an issue that we're very sensitive to, because we do want this to be a safe place for all our visitors. So there'll be a time and a place for showing art that reflects on different issues. But sometimes when we're choosing when.
Let me suggest, since we're a tiny bit behind time for the afternoon, we're about to take a short break, and then we're going to come back with the one and only Refik Anadol, who's hiding over there, and then there's another Q&A. So in the meantime, we're about to take about a 15, 20-minute break, opportunity to talk. And please, if you have questions, you can also come back in the second round. Would that be okay? In that case, I'd like to thank especially the two presenters. And please be back here within the next 20 minutes.